This book is called The Faraway Christmas, a story of the Farralon Islands by Edith Thacher Hurd, illustrated by her husband, Clement Hurd. The Farralon Islands are actually part of San Francisco. They are 28 miles out in the ocean due west from the rest of San Francisco, and they are now a wildlife refuge maintained by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. If you follow this URL or else search on YouTube for Farralon Islands, AQED has done a documentary about the science being done there now that includes a little history of the islands. Based on a true story told by a Coast Guard family, the Evendens, this is The Faraway Christmas. The island was rocky. It was so rocky that when the wind blew, no boat dared come near it. And now, when it was almost Christmas, the wind had come over the ocean. It had come out of the west, and it blew and it blew. The rain had come out of the dark sky, and it rained and it rained. Each morning, when Millie woke up, she lay still under her warm covers, listening. "Still blowing, lickety-larp," she smiled to herself as she half whispered, "lickety-larp." This was the word her father always used when he came down from the lighthouse on a very windy night. Then Millie jumped up and ran to the window. Fog rolled over the island, moving like a strange white ghost. The rain poured down. There were deep pools of water everywhere. Millie thought of the hundreds of rabbits that lived on the island. Oh, poor little things. They must be half drowned by now. She looked around toward the cliffs where the seagulls sat, huddled in their nests. She could hear the sea lions on the rocks barking angrily at the great waves. From the lighthouse on the high hill of the island, the foghorn went woo-ma, woo-ma, all day and all night. "The wind is still blowing," said a voice from across the room. "The boat will never come. It will never dare come near the island today." Millie turned to look at her little brother, Jamie. He, too, was listening to the wind. Millie went and sat down beside him. "No, not today," she said, trying to sound cheerful. But Millie knew as well as Jamie that if the Coast Guard tender was not able to come out from the mainland pretty soon, there would be no Christmas on the island that year. "How many days, Millie?" asked Jamie. Millie looked up at the little colored calendar hanging on the wall by her bed. Every morning she marked off one day. 3, she counted carefully. There are 3 more days until Christmas. Suddenly, Jamie began to cry. It will never come. The boat will never come because the wind will never stop blowing." Millie hugged her brother. "Please, please, Jamie," she said. "Please remember what Daddy said. Never give up the ship." This made Jamie laugh a little. Then he and Millie went down to the warm kitchen. When they had eaten their breakfast, they sat looking at the big paper book full of pictures. This was the catalog. It was from this catalog that they had each picked the Christmas present that their mother would send for. Jamie turned the pages to the trains. He looked for a long time at the little tin train with a black engine and coal car, a caboose, and passengers' cars. It wound up with a key, and the writing underneath the picture said that the whistle could really blow. Millie wanted a doll. When it was her turn, she took the thick catalog and quickly found the dolls. She put her hand on one of the pictures and patted the doll. "The roller skates. You wrote for the roller skates for my doll, too, didn't you?" She looked at her mother, who nodded. and went on with her work. Millie sat thinking of the words under the doll's picture. Curly hair and blue eyes that glows. All day the wind blew. The house shook with the wind. The rain hammered on the windows, and the foghorn never stopped blowing. Boom-ah, boom-ah. When their father came in from the radio shack down by the shore, his oilskins were shining wet. His sou'wester dripped water down his back and onto the kitchen floor. The rain will stop, won't it? The wind won't blow all night. Won't the boat come tomorrow? They asked. I hope so, their father answered slowly, for he was not really thinking of the Coast Guard tender coming from the mainland with its Christmas load for the island families. He was thinking only of the ships and the airplanes that were listening all day and all night for the radio warnings that he and his men must keep sending. Millie stayed awake a long time that night. She kept remembering the Christmas of last year when she lived on the mainland. She had walked with her mother in the streets decorated with gay lights and filled with the singing of Christmas carols. She had seen a real Santa Claus and told him herself what she wished he would bring her. But now it was dark in Millie's room. Only the light from the lighthouse shone in a quick flash through the darkness. The foghorn went boom-ah, boom-ah. Millie began to cry to herself. Millie's mother must have known that she was crying because she came quietly into her room. She took Millie's head on her lap and comforted her. Don't cry, Millie, she said. Tomorrow will be Christmas Eve day, and I think the wind will not blow any more. Why? Why won't the wind blow? Millie sat straight up in her bed and looked through the darkness at her mother. Because, her mother said softly, so as not to wake Jamie, because just before I came upstairs, I looked out of the kitchen window and I saw something in the sky that makes me think that the wind will not blow tomorrow. Millie jumped up, running to the window. She looked at the dark sky over the sea. There she saw something sparkling, shining brightly, and it was not the light from the lighthouse because it did not move but shone steadily. The star, whispered Millie. Then a black cloud covered it, as if the cloud were angry that the little star had dared shine down at Millie in the window. The next morning, Millie and Jamie woke up because of the quietness. Everything was quiet. Everything was still. There was no wind. There was no foghorn. There were only the waves booming on the rocks of the island. Everywhere the sun shone. The ocean was blue, blue, blue. The seagulls sat ruffling their pure white feathers in the sunshine. The rabbits dried their long ears and wet fur. There were rabbits hopping and jumping and playing everywhere on the island. The sea lions barked happily as they basked in the warm sun again. As soon as Millie and Jamie had eaten their breakfast, they ran to the landing pier. Would it come? Would it come? Would the Coast Guard tender come out to the island today from the mainland? Would it come today, Christmas Eve day? All through the morning, no black smoke from the boat smudged the sky. No black speck showed on the sea. The children went to the radio shack. Will the boat come? They asked eagerly as the men came out. There are mighty big waves out there, said the first man. Can't tell, said the second. The sea is pretty rough. At last, the children grew too tired to watch by the sea or to ask questions anymore. They went home slowly, scuffing their feet in the rough sand and small rocks, They played with an old pigeon who had been blown from no place onto the island in the storm. For a little while, they forgot about the boat. They played in the warm sunshine and forgot. Then, suddenly, in the middle of the quietness, there came the long, low sound of a ship's whistle. Far away over the water. The children ran quickly, stumbling in the rabbit holes in their eagerness. From all the houses came mothers with little children, and fathers came out of the radio shack. There was talking and laughing and making of silly jokes. "Hope they don't lose my turkey overboard," said one. "Yeah, salt water won't help my Christmas tree either," laughed another one. But Millie and Jamie were too busy watching to listen. The tender came closer and closer. Its strong bow cut the waves. The water shot as high as the bridge where the captain stood in his oilskins. The island men were already getting their boat ready to go out to the tender, for no ship dared come close to the rocky shores of the island. The little boat swung up, out, over the water on the long wooden boom set high on the pier. Then the boom went down, down, slowly. A great wave reached up, trying to catch the little boat and smash it against the jagged rocks. But when the engine started, the of the motor sounded strong and sure. It was not long before the tiny boat was bobbing beside the tender, held firm by strong ropes thrown from the deck high above. The tender waited patiently all afternoon while the little landing boat brought load after load to the island. The landing basket was filled and refilled. In the last load came the trees, 5 beautiful, straight, little evergreen trees, wrapped in a waterproof canvas. Then it was all over. The tender gave a last doot and was soon disappearing into the darkness. Everyone turned to go home. The men carried the trees over their shoulders, and the children danced about them with their eyes shining like the stars that would soon be hanging from the green branches. Millie and Jamie went to bed quickly that night. In the morning, it was Christmas. Christmas in the high cliffs for the seagulls. Christmas in the rabbit holes for the rabbits. Christmas on the rocks for the sea lions. From the radio shack, the men were allowed to send Christmas messages to the mainland. They were allowed to send Merry Christmas over the sea to the ships and the airplanes in the sky. In Millie and Jamie's house, a small train was whistling beep, beep as it ran wildly through the tissue paper under the Christmas tree. Then Millie took a box from her mother and went to a chair in one corner of the room. The box was long-shaped. It was wrapped in white paper and tied with gay ribbons. Millie untied the ribbons carefully and folded back the white tissue paper. The train stopped whistling, and Jamie came over to stand beside his sister. He watched as Millie very slowly lifted the top of the box. "The most beautiful one in the world," she whispered. The doll's eyes were closed, as if she had been asleep ever since she was put in her box, waiting for the tender to take her to Millie. Millie held her up, and the doll opened her eyes, and they were blue as the ocean in summer, and her hair was curly. On her white boots were tiny, shiny new roller skates, just as Millie had asked for them. Millie took the doll in her arms and hugged her. "I knew," Millie said softly. "I just knew you would come, no matter how hard the wind blew." The end. Thacher Hurd maintains her own webpage. It's easy to find, thatcherhurd.com. You can find information there, including information about this book. And at the bottom on the right here, if you have a t-shirt or someone in your family has a t-shirt that has Goodnight Moon on it with that illustration, remember the person who drew that and who worked on that book was Clement Hurd. So Thacher Hurd and Clement Hurd, between the two of them, they've done more than 70 books for young learners. And this book about a real Christmas in a Coast Guard family off the coast of California has been The Faraway Christmas, a story of the Farralon Islands, written by Edith Thacher Hurd, illustrated by Clement Hurd.